it's a perfect segue to mention water, because I'd like to invite up here our next panel moderator, Professor Cain, if he could come up here. And Bruce Cain is a very, very well-known political scientist who in recent years has started an important center here at Stanford called the Center for the American West. And we are delighted to have him open up our next session about water and climate resilience. Bruce, take it away.
Thank you. Just to correct the record, I didn't found the Center for the American West, but nonetheless, we do a lot of work on climate issues. So since we're running behind, I'm going to keep the introductions fairly short. Let me just say that I think several of the speakers have set the stage for this conversation in terms of broad terms of sustainability challenges. Certainly, one thing that has Tel Aviv and Los Angeles in the same pot is that we're both in arid and semi-arid circumstances. And so it gets back to the point that's been made several times, which is unlike decarbonization, which is global, a lot of the resilience takes place at the scale of the particular climate that you're dealing with. And one key issue for those of us in arid and semi-arid spaces is the issue of water. And both the supply and the demand of water and the cleanliness of water, these are all issues we need to get into. So we have essentially three speakers. We're going to start off with Felicia Marcus. She's going to actually give about 20 or 25 minutes worth of remarks. And then we will go to two panelists, Dror, Avisar, and Maya Crabtree. They will give some remarks, and then hopefully we can get some time for exchange. But of course, we're a little short on time, so we'll do the best we can in the amount of time that we have. So without further ado, Felicia is the Landreth Fellow at Water in the West here. She was in charge of the State Water Resource Control Board during the last drought. She was the person that kept me from taking showers as often as I wanted to, but I still forgive her. So. Did you kill your lawn? Yes, we killed the lawn too. Oh, okay. So I've got two things against her. Okay, Felicia.
Let's see. I'm assuming this would be the clicker and that I don't have to tell you to move it each time.
Move the mic down.
All right, no. There's a clicker? Okay, oh, thank goodness. Right, I'm shorter. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's truly an honor to be here. And my thanks in particular to Alon Tal for putting it together and for his great energy and passion with purpose. And I want to thank Tamar Zamberg as well for her historic leadership and her gracious friendship. And thank you for inviting my friends from LA up here. That always makes me happy. I'm an Angelino, even though I live up here, and I don't let my husband forget that. You're worth it, dear, but don't ever forget what I gave up for you. And I'm very happy to meet new friends from Tel Aviv. I've spent many trips there to visit family and friends and to go to your amazingly energetic WATEC, exhausting WATEC conferences. It's a dynamic and fun place. On this slide, I have to say, I really didn't mean a message by the Chinese sign, but I love this sign that says, please wait patiently for the failure of the system. And I thought it was a good metaphor because it's absolutely what is happening and will happen big time within our cities that are dependent in particular on either imported water or expensive, technically procured water from the ocean or recycling, unless we act more quickly and with focused purpose and intelligence to accelerate our fine start towards sustainability and resilience. But it's not enough. So we're going to have to do a lot. Is an overview. I will tell you at the outset, I'm going to give you some food for thought to feed into the panel. I won't be able to give you the whole water picture, but my idea is just to give you stuff to think about. So Don't worry about how many slides I have that I go through quickly. There's no quiz at the end. And don't worry about the fact that there are too many words on these slides. That way you can get them later on, and I will hear about it from my husband on the ride home, because he always says I put too many words on a slide, but it helps me think. I'll simply say that we just need to always keep in mind that sustainability and resilience are different. There are many conversations. You can have a dinner party argument about this one big time. But the point I want to make is simply resilience is different than sustainability. Sustainability cuts across a lot of things and is about doing as much as you can with the resources you can. Resilience implies a couple things that climate change is throwing at us that I do not believe that many places are actually integrating into their planning. Some places are, many places are not, which is that we are not going to be able to plan our way out of this. We are going to have extremes that are unpredictable. That is the point of climate change. We can't predict the weather now. We are really not going to be able to predict the weather later. And so though we may have 120 years of data in California, we know that that's all out the window in terms of how long our droughts may be or how fierce our storms may be. Additional temperature in the atmosphere is the killer. It changes where precipitation falls in a radical way, less predictable than what we have. So we have to build systems that aren't going to be levees that we can tell anyone will protect them. For example, in the storm flow, we have to build things that we can recover from quickly and more quickly, which is why nature-based solutions are achieving finally the heyday they should have had for the past 100 years, but people are recognizing, and this is true in Tel Aviv and Los Angeles. I'll talk about it just a little bit. Each area is going to have their own story. We're sides of the same coin, but with some differences. I don't know that the differences are more important than the similarities. And then I'm just going to highlight some examples quickly, again, to give you context and food for thought, including some California stage setting and a couple of Israel slides I threw in, but I'll rely on our Israeli colleagues to tell their own story. I only wanted to say that I'm a part of a group called the Water Policy Group, which is 10 former federal, we didn't go through my whole resume, you don't want to hear it, 10 former national water officials on 6 continents who have worked either at the national level or the international level. And we've done a series, we're in the midst of doing, I think, our 4th one, series of surveys of national water ministers. And I got the Israeli answers when we did them last time. We asked the political heads, not the career heads, kind of what kept them up at night. What was the biggest water threat, water security threat facing their countries? And the answer was climate change, almost uniformly. And the biggest barrier, governance and institutions. So just putting that out there. Climate change obviously manifests differently in different places. Some get more wet, some get more dry, some get more hot, etc. You know this story. That is true for those of you who aren't as familiar with Israel as true in Israel and not just the US or California. Here's another way of looking at it. California compared to the rest of the country, long and narrow, of course, just like Israel, different shape, different size, but essentially the same dynamic of covering a number of climate ranges. We have the most variable hydrology in the country. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't for years, sometimes it rains every year. We were in a pretty wet spat the last few years after a couple of historically bad droughts. You see in the US sort of the wet to dry difference, and our water management systems are different in the East than the West. I won't give you a lecture on the water rights system in the West or California, although I can do it in 5 minutes. It's taken me a long time to be able to do it. But we also see that dry part moving. It used to be the 100th meridian, now it's a little further. The other thing that's similar and important to think about as I opened is that both California and our urban areas, particularly in the South, are completely dependent on imported water canals coming from a long way away. We'll talk about other sources and the very, very ambitious retooling towards recycled water and stormwater capture, as well as conservation happening in Southern California in particular. But modern California is only possible because of that system. and is also only possible today because of the vast snowpack that we sometimes have that we are going to lose. So we will have more precipitation falling as rain rather than snow, which has a massive timing issue on that dynamic, where the snowpack is fully a third of our storage in an average year, more in some, less in others, our single largest source of storage, and we are going to lose it as more falls as rain, as it melts out faster, as it absorbs into the foliage. And that is a freight train of pain coming at California that we have been on speed trying to adjust to over the past 10 years, since sort of the early part of the Jerry Brown administration. Israel just, not great, I just snatched these slides just for people to realize there's a lot of wet in the north, beautiful lakes, wetlands, et cetera. The Hula wetlands were my last trip, really windy, really beautiful. But it's not all desert, which is some people think. You have the Mediterranean, you have the wet, you have et cetera. So you have different climates, but you have a place where water comes from, and you even have snow sometimes. And then you have a system of canals, et cetera, that bring water, and as we'll talk about in a minute, much more massive water recycling and desalination per capita than we have in California at present. But again, very much dependent on a large system, governed completely differently. We can get into that sometime if you're interested, but governed very, very differently, more uniformly, certainly in Israel than here. We are a far more fragmented place. There are things in Israel that I wish I could only dream of during our drought. And this is a wallet card. I know it's too many words. I didn't do it to go through. I won't go through it all. I've talked about variable hydrology. Also, as in Israel, people will talk about how there's one thing, like they have the answer, and if those bleeping idiots would just do this one thing that I know they should do, build another dam, do more recycling, do something, it would solve, do desal. I can't tell you how many Israelis have talked to me about how stupid we are to be tough on desal rules on the coast. The key is every place is different, has a different background. Here, every part of the state has a different set of sources. Some have a lot of groundwater, some don't. Some can see the river their water comes from, most don't. Some get it from the Colorado River, some get it from the Owens Valley, some get it from the Sierras, east and west. It just depends. So there's not one answer for anyone, which is why I always put the elephant on the slide, because of the parable of the blind man and the elephant. And this may well be true in Israel as well. When you walk into a conversation about water, every conversation can be completely different, with people knowing one slice of it and arguing it very firmly and thinking anyone that doesn't agree with what they think the solution is an idiot. And in fact, the answer is that it's complicated. And the universal answer is it depends. But the universal answer is mostly we got to get over those divides and do all of it. This is the picture on the bathroom mirror during the drought in the teens. This is one that reminded us of not only the nightmare of that year, but the nightmare that was going to be coming more frequently. And also knowing that we're also in the crosshairs on the Colorado, which has been on a 20-year drought. And our prediction is that we'll have more frequent and drier dries, punctuated by floods. So we have to plan for both, just as you do in Israel. And that is not the same as other places. There are places that are just going to get drier. I fear for South Africa big time, but there are all kinds of places. Even the Colorado Basin, I worry about more than I do the Sierra system in California. So what was our answer? I won't go through it. We did an all of the above plan. It's not a beautiful work of art. It's just 18 pages though, so everybody could read it, where we put all these solutions on the table versus everybody arguing about the right one. And we said, you can keep arguing, we're going to do all of these, because we are collectively facing a freight train of pain, where to make it, we got to do all of it, as opposed to spending time with you arguing about which one. This is our version of trying to get people aligned, because we don't have a uniform system. But again, I just point out that making conservation a California way of life was first. The governor put it first. And of course, it is the cheapest, fastest, and smartest way to go. And Israel, of course, is way ahead of us. Some parts of California are ahead of other parts. And we've done pretty well about it. I'll go back to that. The key to the future is, of course, local and regional leadership. And I know we have one of our next speakers is a regional leader. I'm excited to hear about that. But it's also understanding where in our case, the state government, probably more than the federal government, but money and other tools from the federal government help. It's not, and I think council member Efron talked about this, Alette, it's not a vacuum that the localities can do themselves. It needs to be sort of a nested set of relationships, and we don't have right relationships all the time, at least in California and the West. I've spent a lot of time working on that and have worked at the federal, state, and local level. The local level being running our public works department in LA a zillion years ago, where I thought, pox on both the state and federal houses, because they would come in and think they were smarter or higher, when in fact they're just different. And they didn't know how to actually do things, but they knew how to opine at us and be difficult. So where you stand depends on where you sit, and I've sat in all those chairs. And my view is we need to figure out how to have each do what they can do best, and have the federal and state governments help cities adapt to climate change, as opposed to presuming that they know better. But I've been writing about that, working on that for a long time. But there are certain things that the state and federal government can do that you can't do at the local level, like restore upper forests in order to achieve better snowpack retention, fewer massive conflagrations from overgrown wildfires, et cetera. That can only happen at scale, and it's happening in California big time using cap and trade dollars. Why? Because the multi-benefits, water's a small one. The big one is avoiding loss of life and limb and these vast conflagrations that are now emitting more carbon than fossil fuels around the world. But there's a win-win-win in doing that work, and only they can do it. Same is true of massive floodplain setbacks, so that when we do have these big storms, you can dissipate the flow rather than overtopping a levee, and you can refill those reservoirs, et cetera, but you can spread out the water, dissipate the force so you get flood protection, but you can also restore wetlands. You can also sink it into the ground. Just to get a sense that we've done an awful lot on conservation. Each drought has taken us another level. Anyone who's interested, I'm happy to talk about all the different things that LA has done, but also all the different things the state has done. But it's been considerable, particularly in Southern California. The rest of the state has a long way to go to catch up, other than San Francisco, but they don't really, thank you, David, very good conservation, but they don't really have lawns. So I'm not sure if that's cheating or not, but it's still impressive. But a lot of work, both from the private sector and utility sector. And during droughts, we really rise to the occasion, and we only go back about a third each time. So we're far more efficient than we were the last time. For us, lawns and leaks are still a great frontier in terms of urbans. So in the urban level, we got almost 50%, maybe a little bit less of our water we can save without too much ado, other than having to do things. Obviously, messaging is important, and that helps during a drought because we get more free media, but there's also been a lot of work on that. Recycling, I'd say it's on steroids. One of the things we did during the drought is we did a whole series of streamlined state standards. This is where it was helpful, so that people would know what they were aiming at and unleash these two big projects I'm going to mention in Los Angeles, because the utilities knew there was something they could aim at, rather than being at the mercy of an individual permit writer or two different permit writers that had to negotiate. In doing that sort of thing, it also gave third-party validation to the safety of it. If you met very high standards, some people think our standards are too high. I think they're where they need to be to get started, because the first group that does recycled water and makes a mistake and gets people sick will kill recycled water, even for lawn watering. So I think it's good to be cautious. We also put out a couple of $1 billion in grants and loans to take projects from the drawing board and get them into the ground. It's been really fun in the intervening decade to go to ribbon cuttings, which as a regulator is really way more fun than your usual meetings. And then we have the greater LA mega region, and Deputy Mayor Sutley talked about the Salon Chic knowledge. We had a big step forward under Mayor Garcetti with goals to get LA to be 70% reliable on local water. During the drought, it was 90% on imported water, and sort of flipping that around. Started at 50, went up to 70. We're still talking about what it means. But to do that, LA needs to have aggressive recycling, stormwater capture and even more conservation. So on the way, and Mayor Bass and Nancy have picked that up and are really working on the details that it takes to make it happen. It's one thing to proclaim it. It's a very different thing to actually make a project go and to size it and scale it at the right level. And I'd say of her many contributions, one of the biggest is what we're starting on now, which is to redo other plans and actually do a resilience plan so we can see how conservation, stormwater capture, and these very expensive recycle water projects fit into a portfolio that gets us the best environmental, economic, because of affordability to be sure, but why waste money, but also operability. So there's going to be some premium for having control over your water molecules. But again, we need to figure out how to scale it thoughtfully so that we don't break the bank or make it impossible. Similarly, we're nestled with our partners in the mega region. LA is about 4 million, the county's about 10 million, and the Metropolitan Water District, which is the largest wholesale water provider, it's the imported water people. They bring in the state water project water from the Western Sierras and the Colorado River water. They were created to build the Colorado River aqueduct. They represent 19 million people all across Southern California for imported water. I'll just say they have a 150 million gallon a day project. They're moving from being the imported water people to really providing recycled water because they're the ones who could do it at scale versus their small members. LA, obviously being the biggest member, can do it themselves. Up to 230 million gallons a day, which will be the biggest project in the world. Orange County has been doing it for quite some time. They finished 100% of Orange County Sanitation District's wastewater a couple of years ago. That was a grand party. And then the County of Los Angeles, again, with LA being a big driver and the progenitor of having done this at a local level, has done a measure that will provide $300 million a year for multi-benefit stormwater capture, flood control, water quality benefits, and urban greening. It'll be a multi-decadal shift, but those of you who have been to LA, it will transform the face of LA County, and it includes some really interesting equity, both governance issues and objectives. And then, yes, of course, LA has big floods too, just as Councilmember Efron talked about in that tragic story just, so recently happened. And as I said, we have the LA capture story, and we have the use of nature-based solutions because you can get multiple benefits from it. On the long term, you're getting more bang for each local buck, and you're actually getting that urban greening that we need so much in climate. I just commend to you The Control of Nature by John McPhee, which talks about how devastating floods can be in LA. San Francisco, I will say, and not just because my husband's here and he works on it, that while LA is going to be the epicenter in the US of a city adapting to water scarcity big time in terms of scale, San Francisco is for dealing with sea level rise. David Behar, who you'll hear from later in this conference, is also a leader in this among government officials, where they have actually passed a measure that's raising $500 million, creating a new governance structure to use terraced wetlands, nature-based solutions to buffer sea level rise instead of a war of seawalls. It's massive. It's massively huge in terms of its financial implications, and figuring out how to raise the money to do it in LA and in San Francisco is probably the biggest challenge. It's not technical, it's not engineering, it's how do we possibly pay for it. And I commend to you the Adaptation Atlas, where they actually, the San Francisco Estuary Institute and SPUR, an urban group, came together and did a report engaging all of the cities, but giving them maps of the kind of work they could do to do this kind of restoration and also protect their people, instead of, again, a war of seawalls. There are others all over the world that many of you know. I won't go through it all, but there's creative things to learn from everywhere. Singa, of course, is the all of the above original place because of their 50% of their water comes from Malaysia, which threatens to cut it off every other day, it seems. And so they are the world leaders in, like Israel, in desal recycling, and they're doing a lot in terms of nature-based solutions as well. Really interesting place. Tucson, Phoenix Mesa are doing a lot of recycled water and using it to restore their urban rivers at the same time and get groundwater recharge. San Diego is doing very advanced recycling. And of course, they have their desal facility. They are the most vulnerable big city because of their end of every pipe, but they're doing great stuff on conservation as well. Talked about Orange County. Las Vegas is probably the most advanced with 100% recycling, a ban on non-functional turf, and they've even become partners with Metropolitan to help pay for the Metropolitan project, at least as far as planning, eventually as far as construction, in exchange for being able to get some of Metropolitan's Colorado River water, which is right next to them. That kind of bigger thinking, expanding the problem, getting an economy of scope is a way that can help us afford some of this work. And Melbourne has pretty cool stuff, and there's issues there. I'm gonna just go quickly, almost done. And I just say, as I probably, there are lessons everywhere. We've learned an awful lot from Israel. The technological innovations, the governance innovations, et cetera, are things that have helped us think about what we need to do. They do make us feel better sometimes because yours are harder. But it does give us a laundry list of things to ponder and feel good about. Similarly, Australia, which has a similar climate, even has a similar water rights system that they reformed in different ways, sometimes for good, sometimes I'm not so sure. But again, a lot of incredible work to protect urban greening, do recycling, et cetera, and conservation. And then, of course, you know better, but I did take a look at that adaptation report, and I was very impressed at the scale of things happening in Tel Aviv. I'm more familiar with Israel as a whole than I ever been with Tel Aviv, and I've been there many times. But you'll see that 100% implementation of smart water meters, integrating nature-based solutions, looking at the river as part of the city and part of an asset rather than something just to be exploited, expanding that access to beaches. I hadn't thought about the fact that we have that in common as well, the development of the urban forest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All things that we can share. And my view in this hard work is that having company makes all these hard issues easier somehow, even to bounce ideas up. That was the whole point of the water policy group and why I joined it. The people in Australia were the people who I used as advisors in California during our drought because they had been through a big one just before us. And of course, you have the organizational differences at the top where you now have one water carrier and you can tell everybody that ag needs to take the recycled water and desal is for drink. It's just much simpler to do with the physical setting you have and the governance setting you have. Almost done. And then I would just say, again, and maybe I'm just being defensive here, and I'm about to speak at the IDA conference again this year, where people accused us of, someone accused me of being the lady who killed desal in California. And I said, hardly, I'm the person who saved it. Because in order to save it, you needed a level playing field, right? Because you had an incredible impact on the marine environment from once through cooling, which my board, before I got there, had phased out. Every power plant on the coast of California is changing out from once through cooling to some other kind of cooling because people have spent years trying to protect the marine environment from that once through cooling. It has a tremendous impact on our fisheries. I'm looking at you again, honey. Thank you very much for your work on that over the years. But there's no way to say desal is more important so we can kill all the larvae, pull in all the fish food, and destroy the fishing industry. So the context in California was that we really care about that. Not saying Israelis don't. I've been accused of saying that. But if you do look at our regulations, the screens in Israel, I'm not critiquing, it's just everybody has different choices and different exigencies and all of that. The screens on Israeli desal facilities look like tennis rackets. Ours look like little cheese graters. I'm just saying, it's just different. But it enables the plants to go forward and know what they're aiming at. And so we haven't stopped them. We're just trying to make sure they deal with their externalities. The same is really true on recycling. Again, you have that more uniform national governance structure where you can tell people which water they get. We cannot. We have thousands of water agencies and very little regulatory authority over them, except in emergencies, except for water quality. And again, the geography is just different, but you've developed the world leading drip irrigation, whether you're talking Netafim, which has transformed California in big ways, or NDRIP, or any of those Israeli companies have really done a benefit for all of us. And then finally, we're facing common issues together. How to pay for it again is really, really important and really, really hard, because we also have to assure affordability for people. How do we engage them? They have to be more engaged when we're asking them to spend so much more. How do we make that case for investment, which means making the case about how terrible it'll be if we don't invest it now for our kids and our grandkids, how to shape these projects, how to integrate nature, et cetera. So a ton of things that we have together. And of course, my Silicon Valley slide, all this technology makes it easier because you can trust but verify, whether it's for treatment standards or efficiency or finding leaks or all those things. Remote sensing make all sorts of things possible that weren't before. And then I'll stop, another set of synergies. There's just so much we could do together, and I really look forward to the conversation to come. Not just today, but in the months and years to come. I'm easy to find. So thanks very much.
So could we have Dror and Maya come up and take their chairs here? So I've asked Dror and Maya both to speak for about 5 to 7 minutes on some of the things that Felicia said in the remarks, her remarks, and then we'll either have some, depending on how much time we actually have, we'll either have a conversation up here or go immediately to the audience. We'll just see. But we're going to try to stay within the limits. Okay, Dror, do you want to go first?
So, good morning. Happy to be here. I'm Professor Dror Avisar from Tel Aviv University, the head of Water Research Center and the head of the Hydrochemistry Research Group. Usually I'm dealing with chemistry of persistent compounds and the way to break them down. This is the type of study that I'm doing. Currently, I'm in Oregon State University in sabbatical. So I had a short flight, no jet lag at all. So a few things, probably you know that one of the main causes for water shortage is population growth that increase the water demand, increase the creation of and the production of wastewater. Urban domestic wastewater is #1 pollution source for any water sources in the world, worldwide. Any place there is urban wastewater that are not sufficiently collected and sufficiently treated, and there is no solution for the treated wastewater, there is a problem. So when we talk about cities and the water in the cities, we have to think about 2 ways. There is the water that get in, and there is the water that get out. There is the drinking water that we have to take care and to be sure that the drinking water that we are getting from that city, it's for a long time, and the quality is the best quality. Of course, all the good regulations, drinking water regulations, facing all the drinking water regulations, and if there is enough. So we need quality and quantity. The other thing is the wastewater, because 3/3 of any human consumption create wastewater. And as I told you, wastewater is the #1 enemy of pollution water sources. So the problem is that if there is city, there is no central sewage system, or not sufficient, or still using cesspools, and there is no solution for the wastewater can leak to the waterways, and there is the most tragedy in water sciences, the link between wastewater and drinking water. And there is the city getting actually a contaminated drinking water causing by their own wastewater. So this is something that any city is supposed to be sure to build, to maintain for a long time, the 2 systems, the drinking water and the wastewater. And this is very important. So we need sufficient infrastructure for a long time, both drinking water and wastewater. And if we're talking about the solutions, we talk, of course, we talk about desalination all the time. You talk about desalination. In Israel, you know, we are using desalination. There is cities that using 100% of drinking water today is a desal water. You can start here in the US, desal brackish groundwater.
Yeah.
There is a lot of brackish groundwater.
Absolutely.
If there is a problem to start with the ocean water,
exactly.
we can start with brackish groundwater. There is a lot of brackish groundwater, and it's already connected to pumps and connected to the distribution system. So it's much cheaper. There is less salinity. So this is something very important to do. This is a solution. Of course, in Israel, we started in the 1992 with the Rabin government. This is the first government in Israel that realized that wastewater is a national problem. So they established the wastewater authority, and we start to recycle, to collect, to treat, and recycle wastewater. And this is one of the biggest, huge, most significant environmental revolution in Israel. Because one, we stopped the #1 enemy of the environment, the wastewater, domestic wastewater, from flowing all over the rivers, streams, creeks, lakes, coastlines. And second, we are start using this water as a main source for agricultural irrigation. Today, we are almost reaching the 80% of the water that we're using for agricultural is, of course, coming from wastewater. Another project that could be done, we're doing it in Israel with wastewater. I know that in Southern California, there is a lot of project in artificial recharge, capturing floods, as you said, and doing artificial groundwater recharge. This is a very good, when I worked in UC Santa Barbara 20 years ago, we did many projects in Orange Country and nearby Ventura and Oxnard areas, demonstrating the quality of the water coming from artificial recharge, groundwater coming from artificial recharge. This is a fantastic thing. Another thing is, of course, applying low-tech solutions. One of the main problems in cities, as we heard this morning, is floods. To avoid, to buffer floods, we can use constructed wetlands in any open space, and we can use green walls to buffer the water that's coming from the sky towards the streets in order to decrease the runoff. And of course, adopting many high-tech technologies you mentioned. This is a very important thing as well. Using economical tools is always important to engage the community in education. And finally, and I think most important thing is improved management. Most of the water crisis in the world coming from lack of management. People, we are. The people that sitting in the cities, manage the waters, manage the environment, are not doing a good job. So in integrated urban water management, adopting holistic approach, we can ensure that the water will be better.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll come back to some of these questions that you raised. So Maya?
Okay, thank you very much. This is Night Height.
Mhm.
I'm very happy and proud to be here, and thank you for the invitation. In my country, it's about almost midnight. So I'm jet lagged, and I do apologize if I forget the odd word or so, and please don't feel free to interfere and correct me. So my name is Maya Crabtree, and I represent Forum 15. It's the voluntary umbrella organization of Israel's major cities. Some of our projects include 20 cities, some include 25, etc. But the founding mothers or fathers are 15 larger cities, led, founded, and still chaired by Tel Aviv Yafo municipality. And so I'm very proud to be here with my colleagues from Tel Aviv Yafo. who lead our volunteering organization. This is a unique coalition of cities striving to lead municipal agendas together and use a common power in order to promote joint causes and even influence national policy. Our cities originally voluntarily adopted the first climate policy or compact or convention in the framework of ICLEI in 2008, and in 2011 adopted a first green building policy. And that's just a very short and select example of what we do. So why are cities involved in this panel at all? Now, as was explained earlier, and thank you, Felicia, for mentioning that, Israel is unique in being a very, very centralized country. Within the OECD, it is arguably in many parameters the most centralized country. What follows is that water, as Dror mentioned, is run nationally. Pricing, allocation, production, as you may call it, desalination, etc. So technically speaking, it's not our problem. Why should it be our problem? Cities are only responsible for taking care, as you mentioned, of the water within the city boundaries. But I would argue that treating it as an urban issue can actually help us deal and tackle our other challenges of adaptation and building sustainability and resilience. And I'll say a bit more about that. So first of all, we're influenced and impacted in several aspects. For example, irrigation. Urban irrigation relies on supply from the national level and pricing from the national level. And as my colleagues in Tel Aviv have explained to me and showed me, the need for irrigation in terms of in the time of climate change, in face of climate change, has increased over the years. This means even this small detail has increased the budget you need in order to maintain green spaces in areas for adaptation, and not only for adaptation purposes. Trees, by my colleagues tell me, from 6 months of irrigation a year, they went up to 10 months of irrigation. Basically, as we heard yesterday in the tour about the fire season, there's no more irrigation season. It's all year round almost. And that's just an example. And of course, we have a responsibility to our citizens as the first and forefront element responsible for quality of life. When there's a problem, they come to us. They don't come to national government. And lastly, as was mentioned, we do deal with water. We do have our own water source, and that's the water that is created or runs into the city. And the irony is that this water resource isn't used, isn't tapped. And the reason is that because our cities are only responsible for the water created in the cities, our main concern is, as Noah mentioned earlier, to get rid of them as soon as possible, because we are talking about critical, life-threatening situations, damage to infrastructure, and we don't have the resources or the time to invest in maintaining. So that's our main challenge in cities, to think how to retain that water while not threatening and not endangering life and infrastructure. With our limited authority, that's a big challenge. Now, cities like Tel Aviv, the leadership of Tel Aviv, but also other cities are forming various strategies, and we can talk more about that later, in order to tackle this challenge, starting by integrating water planning into spatial planning. And I do believe in spatial planning because I'm a spatial planner, and I have to. I'd be betraying my profession. Continuing with nature-based solutions, de-asphaltization, for example, the creation of underground reservoirs for water used for irrigation later. And of course, and not least, sharing information. One of our my main tasks is to create this sharing of information. And just last week, we went on a tour in Tel Aviv with all our cities and many other cities around the country, checking out, looking on the ground solutions that Tel Aviv municipality has been implementing. So we believe that first of all, we should recognize the problem as a problem that we share and have to solve together, because really we have here an asset that we can use in order to tackle drought and loss of water.
Okay.
Let me just explain those noises. So basically, my daughter's down the underground shelter.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the same thing with earthquakes.
Tournament, yes, there's a tournament in Tel
yeah.
Aviv today.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
all right. So look, I want to ask some questions here. Felicia didn't go into this in great detail, but one of the real problems that's going to come up with each one of these panels is the cost of doing adaptation and resilience, okay? Here, one of the reasons why we haven't gone to desal and we're just starting to use recycled water, direct potable use of that. This
I
is,
should have mentioned.
well,
that.
you should this time come in on this, but
Yeah.
we're just moving in that direction. But understand, and here's the question I have for the scientists, can we drop the cost of this in any way? Because here in this country, for example, we get water from the Hetch Hetchy here at Stanford. It comes down largely without much of pumping from a fairly clean source, which is unfortunately national park area, but nonetheless, it's granite, doesn't have a lot of, stuff that gets into the water. That's basically about $600 to $800 per acre foot for this area. If you do the recycle water, which we are doing more of, and Felicia could tell you more about that, you're talking $1,500 to $2,000 per acre foot. And when you talk about desal, you're talking about $2,500 to $3,500 per acre foot. So cost is going to be a huge thing, and it has environmental justice concerns, whether you're talking about the Palestinians or you're talking about the Latinos here or whatever. It has environmental consequences because usually utilities put that into their base rate. So what's happening on that front? Is it because of the extreme energy that is required, or is it because of all the things we have to do to disperse the brine? What is it that keeps us from really driving the cost down? Because that's not going to be much of a solution for us if these costs keep rising.
Yes, at first, I have to say that the prices of desalination get down during the years, in Israel as well. But we have to understand that water, drinking high quality water in a semi-arid area costs money.
Yeah.
And this is something that government, here it's federal, it's a kind of a government in Jerusalem that's supposed to take care of that and to take responsibility. I mentioned that in '93, Rabin, as a prime minister, took responsibilities. He was the first prime minister that understand and realize that wastewater is a serious national problem. I remember that all in those days, in the 70s and 80s, and even the 80s, in the 90s, when we established Adam Teva V'Din, all the streams and river in Israel was polluted by sewage. Raw sewage, not treated sewage, raw sewage. So it was a disaster in Israel, really disaster. And this is something that the government understood and took responsibility. It's not something that city took responsibility, or municipality is supposed to take responsibility. It's supposed to be gathered and managed by a government that putting money, and they put a lot of money, build the management authorization that called wastewater authorization in Israel that working till today. They gave money to municipalities. We start paying tax as a citizen for treating water, treating the wastewater, and there is a revolution, that's all. This is first, the government, the federal here, in our country, the desalination is the same. Desalination only occurred when the government took responsibility for that and privatized it, and then companies could come and, give prices, and an environment costs money. It's something that we cannot avoid. And we have to know that if we want to live in this sophisticated world with a lot of chemicals and a lot of potential contaminations in water, in the air, and very, very crowded society, in very, very crowded cities, and to drive sophisticated cars in a very artificial environment we call cities, complicated artificial environment, there is a cost for the pollution. And there is pollution, air pollution, there is water pollution, and it costs money. And someone's supposed to take responsibility. It's not the citizen itself. The citizen can pay tax, and the city municipality can organize everything in order to manage the idea, but it's supposed to come from a bigger founder called government. And this is something that even here, I think, is supposed to happen.
Yeah, but bear in mind that in the United States, a lot of the water responsibilities fall to local government. And
To local?
the Constitution
Yeah.
gets in the way because basically states and cities have different responsibilities in the national government. And
Mhm.
so, Felicia, maybe you can mention a little bit about what we did to change how we were using recycled water. Just do it briefly, that we didn't allow for potable use.
We didn't used to. I mean, it's interesting because most cities, even at potable reuse, are going towards indirect potable reuse, which is standards to recharge groundwater. Essentially, I'm oversimplifying it. And then direct potable reuse, which is either augmenting the raw water that goes into a treatment plant or a reservoir, and direct potable reuse, sometimes flange to flange, but most are trying to use some kind of environmental barrier because it gives you just that extra added time, the extra dilution. But we have very high standards. We went through all kinds of things because it is cheaper and available. It's less expensive than desal, doesn't have the externalities. And if a city has a big groundwater basin, like Orange County has, like LA has, the San Gabriel Valley, which is an area that's in the watershed that also goes down to Orange County. That whole watershed is probably the most advanced in the country, let alone in Southern California. It's cheaper and better to get it and put it in the ground, because then you can do it, put it away, and it's there for multi-year.
Yeah, and we
droughts.
should point out that in California, we recharge aquifers partly to use them for supporting crops, et cetera, but we also use it to keep the salt water from getting
Yes,
into
exactly.
the aquifers. And that's really,
Yes.
Orange County and Monterey are examples of agricultural areas that needed to keep saltwater intrusion.
To create mounding ground.
Yeah, so double benefits are a way to sort of move the inertia in the political system.
I'll give
in
you
ways.
another one that's big,
Yeah.
and it's one that we're spending a lot of time on in cross-training between our wastewater and the drinking water programs, because drinking water, sometimes they're in the same agency, but even if they're in the same agency, they don't always talk to each other. But more, Eric Rosenblum, who's here, and a team of people, and I've done a number of projects nationally looking at communities around the country. And what you're finding in the East is that recycling is going way up. Recycling will eventually go up in the Bay Area at some point, but the drivers are different, right? It's not all about scarcity, it's about nutrient pollution.
Yeah.
So if you've got to clean up your wastewater to a high enough level anyway,
Right.
you can also use it to repel groundwater intrusion, and you can use it to deal with offsetting other nutrients that end up going into our water bodies. And there's a pretty famous case on the East Coast on the Chesapeake Bay, Hampton Road Sanitation District, you know it, where it's won every award there is, where the head of that wastewater agency looked at the community as a whole, and that's where the economy of scope came up in our report, and talking about growing the problem, was he saw that he could save his community $1 billion overall by just treating it all the way to drinking water and recharging it.
Yeah.
And so it's coming full circle, and you've got to look at the economics in terms of what you're spending on your wastewater side too.
But, in US, we have to build coalitions, and co-benefits are very important. So Maya, I want to switch over a little bit. As a political scientist, I cannot moderate a panel and not bring in the political questions of sectoral uses of the water, different sectors of the economy. Now, that is a huge issue right here. Felicia has the misfortune of co-teaching with me, and when I get bored, I like to challenge her. And I was pushing her on the fact. Yes, yes, we argue in front of them when they look like they're getting sleepy. But anyway, the bottom line is that in California, 40% of all the water goes to agriculture, and agriculture is about 2% of our GDP. Okay, and then another, I think it's about 40% goes to environmental flows, and the rest go to the people. Is that right? Sort of.
No, it's okay. Well, do this quickly. It's half of the water stays in the river, but a lot of it you couldn't.
Yes,
catch
you
it
couldn't
in
access. I
floods.
understand. You're just putting more detail.
But when
on
it comes to what's regulatory, it's a small
Yeah,
sliver.
okay. But the point is that there are competing political interests
Yes.
for the water, okay? Whether I've got the numbers right or not. Let's just stipulate that there is a lot of water and right now it goes to agriculture. And so because we have direct democracy, it could be changed overnight. We would be in court, a la Trump, on takings and things like that, but we could do that, okay? And so we don't necessarily have to invest in a lot of technology. We could simply shrink one of the industries in California down considerably. And we're already doing that. We are retiring land. Now, this, of course, horrifies Felicia, so we'll let her speak last. But Maya, are there any kinds of tensions like that, or is it all seamless in Israel and they never argue? It doesn't seem likely, given my knowledge of Israelis, and I grew up in a Jewish community, so I'm just curious. Anybody argue there about this?
So I think you probably know that we have the same issues in Israel with agriculture. Of course, agriculture is a big thing. Having said that, Israel, agriculture is a main aspect of our sustainability and resilience. Being an island country, maintaining our own agriculture is a national priority, and I think we all recognize it. And one of the issues is really on a political level in terms of agriculture is more the opening of the market to competing agriculture produce from Europe, etc., and China. And the water issue, we find ourselves also combating, but also on the same side, because agriculture in Israel has moved very many years ago to recycled water, and basically most of the fresh water, ironically, goes, for example, to our toilets. We flush drinking water, but we irrigate our tomatoes in America with recycled water, which is a weird paradox connected with pricing, etc.
Yeah.
But also, I just want to tap into what my colleagues mentioned earlier. In Israel, it is one of the problems of desalination is we think we solved the water problem, and people really believe. Whereas we growing up in the 80s, every child knew that you have to save water. It was very well accepted. Now people argue, and they truly believe that we solved the water problem. There is no water shortage in Israel. Everything's fine, and so we are going to depend on desalination. Not only for economic reasons, also it's really changed the mindset. And whereas retaining the water in every way possible, definitely in a city, which is more complicated than in the open spaces, of course, isn't worth your while. It is simply not worth the while of cities to do that. In terms of pricing, agriculture does receive special pricing, but nature receives much less than what you described here. Whether it's 40% or 50%, much less. And we have to remember, we don't have as many natural resources as you have here.
Right.
And basically, most of the drinking water comes from the sea and returns to the sea, which is again ironic.
Yes, and the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean has its pollution issues too, because you not only have the brine issues, but you have untreated wastewater from other countries that are in there.
Yep.
So you're sipping in a dirtier pool. So, okay, well, on that cheery note, well, I know, but I've got a note that says we have to finish. So we could go on with this fascinating discussion, but let's thank our panelists for their presentation.